Welcome to the Systems Thinker Show. This is Season 5, Episode 40, and it is fantastic to have you with us. A special shout out to all of our listeners in now 32 different countries. That's just amazing. We're trying to hit a goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and we could really use your help. Listen, 44% of our listeners are actually subscribed, so if you could do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe or follow button, it really helps us with the algorithm and lets us keep bringing you these deep dives into business culture. Today, we're going to talk about something huge, why most big change efforts just fail. And we're going to explore a really powerful, maybe even a little controversial, idea for how to fix it by tapping into something we usually ignore at work, fantasy.
Okay, so let's just start with this number, because it's kind of staggering. 70%. Think about that. 7 out of every 10 times a company tries to make a big, important change, it just doesn't work. It fizzles out. And you have to ask, why, right? We've got the smart strategies, the detailed spreadsheets, the perfectly mapped out project plans. So what on earth is going wrong?
And the answer, it turns out, is both really simple and incredibly profound. We keep trying to appeal to people's logical brains, but real, lasting change, that's powered by the heart. You just can't spreadsheet your way into getting people genuinely inspired. You've got to create an emotional connection, a vision of the future that people want to run towards.
And this leads us to this fascinating and kind of provocative idea from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. Law 32. It says to truly move people, you have to play to their fantasies, tap into their deepest hopes and dreams for a better reality. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds a little manipulative, right? But what if we could flip that? What if we could use this principle ethically to actually make work better and our teams stronger?
Okay, so theory is great, but how does this play out in the real world? Let's dive into a case study. We're going to go inside a manufacturing company called Aurora Components. They were facing a pretty serious crisis, and we're going to see exactly how they used this idea to turn everything around.
So you got to picture the scene at Aurora. It was grim. For 3 straight years, growth was totally flat. People were leaving in droves. A 22% turnover rate is just brutal. And morale? It was in the basement, especially after this really painful tech rollout they'd just gone through. The thing is, they had a solid strategy on paper, but nobody cared. It had no soul. It was just another binder collecting dust on a shelf.
So instead of throwing more PowerPoint slides at the problem, the new COO tried something completely different. They created what they called an aspirational operating narrative. Think about that. They stopped selling a strategy and started selling a story, a really vivid picture of what a better, easier, more meaningful day at work could actually feel like for every single person, from the person running the machine to the person planning the schedule.
So, the big question is, did it work? Oh yeah, let's just look at the numbers. First off, voluntary turnover. People choosing to leave plummeted from that painful 22% all the way down to 13%. That's a 41% drop. People decided this was a place worth staying.
But it didn't stop there. Next, their overall equipment effectiveness, which is a really key measure of how productively you're running your factory, it jumped by 6 points. The machines literally started running better because the people running them were more bought in.
And finally, schedule adherence, basically their ability to do what they said they were going to do, shot up by 9 points. And that's huge. That means less chaos, fewer last-minute emergencies, and a much calmer, more predictable place to work. The fantasy was starting to look a lot like reality.
Okay, so those results are incredible. But the really crucial question is how? How do they actually do it? How do you take a nice-sounding story and turn it into hard numbers like that? Let's break down their playbook.
Now this is where it gets really cool, because you see this blend of Hollywood imagination and engineering discipline. They made movie trailers of a better day at work, but then they balanced it with things like decision theater to make tough choices transparent and, critically, fantasy guardrails. They delivered very specific wins and built these visible 30, 60, 90-day proof loops to show everyone, hey, this is real. We're actually doing this.
And this was the COO's mantra. It's the absolute key to using this whole principle ethically. No wish casting. What that meant was that every single promise, every piece of that aspirational story had to be anchored to something real. It had to be tied to a specific metric and a real, tangible process. This wasn't about selling some impossible dream. It was about building a believable, step-by-step roadmap to a much better place.
So how does this idea of playing to fantasies really stack up against the wisdom of other big thinkers in management? Let's do a little thought experiment.
Let's pull up a virtual roundtable and put Green's Law in conversation with some of the giants in the field.
So, on one hand, you've got Green, who's all about creating that emotional pull, that powerful vision that mobilizes desire. But then you've got someone like Petersenge, the systems thinking guru, who would raise his hand and add a crucial warning. You have to ground that fantasy in systems thinking. Otherwise, you might make one team's life better while accidentally causing a huge mess for someone else down the line.
And this is a brilliant way to see how you get from a cool idea to actual action. John Cotter, Mr. Change Management, he would hammer on creating short-term wins to build belief and show people the fantasy is real. And then you have someone like Linear Johnson, who would insist on taking that fantasy and baking it into the daily rhythm of the business, embedding it in the meetings, the metrics, the daily accountability.
So if we look at this all together in a table, you can really see the different flavors. For Green, proof is just momentum, people getting on board. For Senge, it's got to be a change at a system-level KPI. For Cotter, it's those tangible 30, 60, 90-day wins. And for Johnson, the proof is right there on the shop floor scoreboards every single day, with a clear owner and a review cadence for every single promise. But you see the common thread, right? A vision without proof isn't a vision. It's a hallucination.
Okay, so let's try to pull all this great thinking together. Let's build an actionable framework. How do you actually combine that inspiring, heart-driven story with the practical, nuts and bolts structure you need to make it happen?
This right here is the essential balancing act. It's two sides of the same coin. On one side, you've got influence. That's the story, the fantasy. Its whole job is to stir desire, to create meaning. But on the other side, you need infrastructure, your management operating system. Its job is to make that awesome future repeatable, reliable. Here's the risk. A story without a system just creates cynicism. But a system without a story, that just creates bureaucracy and apathy. You have to have both.
And boom, this slide is the ultimate payoff. This is exactly how Aurora did it. Just look at that first line. The fantasy claim was so simple and human. No more scavenger hunts for tools and parts. We've all felt that frustration, right? But they didn't just say it. They connected it to specific systems, 5S, kitting, Kanban, and they measured it with a hard KPI, a reduction in search time per shift. Every single promise followed that exact formula. An emotional claim, a concrete system, and a hard number to prove it.
And why does this stuff matter so much right now? Well, because honestly, we have an engagement crisis on our hands. Recent Gallup data shows that only about 21% of employees and just 27% of managers are truly engaged in their work. We're leaving a massive amount of human potential, creativity, and energy on the table. A compelling, believable vision is one of the most powerful tools we have to start changing that.
So, when all is said and done, what's the big takeaway here? It's this. Using Law 32 ethically in a business context isn't about fooling people or selling them a fairy tale. It's about selling a vision of a better day that you are 100% committed to building brick by brick. It's about replacing a frustrating reality with an inspiring and totally achievable new one.
So we'll leave you with this one question to think about. Your team, right now, has a fantasy for a better way to work, a way with fewer frustrations, more collaboration, and more meaning. Are you listening to it? And maybe more importantly, are you building the system to actually make it real? For additional information, please feel free to reach out to us via our website at www.karasinnovations.com. Also, check out our other podcast, The Continuous Improvement Lab. And a huge thank you to our executive producer and founder, Linear Johnson. Thanks for tuning in.